It is Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to everybody in the live chat. And it's always good, and in the anybody watching this as well. But it's always good when our spiritual fathers give us messages that are will help us in our journey. And I have a couple of them for you today, possibly three if we have time. But it's Sunday. We like to keep things very casual on Sunday, hence why I save these letters for Sunday. That way I don't have to do any actual work to prepare for them, except read them to you. So the first we have is from Bishop Eleganti. He's a bishop in Europe who is on my short list of people who will eventually be given an apostolic visitation because he will frequently publish letters to the faithful, shredding whatever it is Francis is doing, which is what he does here today. Following that, you may not have heard this, but there's a dubium that was issued that many of you will be very happy to hear about. You will probably not be happy with the answer he's going to get because even as the website that published it notes, the church has kind of ruled on this question already. But the dubium focuses on the question of, can priests with the James Martin inclination, who are very proud of that, who believe that there's nothing wrong with that, are their sacraments valid? Are their masses valid? Is their priesthood valid? That's what this dubium focuses on. And if we have time, we have a letter from a priest as well about navigating this sort of evils celebrated this month and the crisis in the church. So let's start here with Bishop Eleganti, though. He is he's asking for it with these kind of things. Here he publishes this headline. This is a response to this change in the papacy that document from Francis proposes. And the headline published by Marco Tosati is Vatican Document on the Pope, a mirage that leads to chaos and tramples the truth. Again, when you see this stuff, you can tell that he's asking for trouble. By the way, let me know in the live chat or in the comments if there is any problem with the stream quality this morning. I set it to the lowest quality the video side can do in an effort to keep it from having any distorted audio, which seems to be a bandwidth problem more than anything else. So let me know if this works. Anyway, here's the letter from Bishop Marian Eleganti, the auxiliary bishop of Chur. In my opinion, it is wrong to consider the acceptance of the Roman Catholic papal primacy of jurisdiction by other Christians as a criterion for its validity and legitimacy, and understand or exercise the papacy accordingly in a different way than before. There can be a question of downgrading the office of Peter until it becomes acceptable to as many separated Christians as possible, but is no longer what Christ wants it to be. The criterion is therefore whether it in its current form corresponds to this will and the truth of the gospel, remains a foundation of Christ, i.e. divine right, and whether its development and dogmatization over time occurred in the Holy Spirit or not. We have always been convinced that the Holy Spirit guides the church to the full truth and keeps it in the truth, which is why it is considered infallible. This is why in the profession of faith we also believe in the church together with the Holy Spirit. Furthermore, there is an infallible dogmatization of the office of Peter. In this sense, the answer to the question of what the office of Peter consists of and how it is exercised, especially whether it is legally binding or not for all Christians, cannot be the result of negotiations that seek the largest or smallest denominator common. Reality, what has been achieved so far, that is, what Christ wanted, cannot be called into question ahistorically according to the motto, back to the beginning. Here, the decisive factor must be the truth or will of God, not consensus with separated brothers. The question is of a fundamental nature. It touches the roots of Roman Catholicism. Ecclesiology. Did the papacy and the Roman Catholic Church develop authentically and under the guidance of the Holy Spirit until the dogmatization of Vatican I? Or do other ecclesial communities and Christian denominations consider this development essentially an aberration, an alienation of the gospel, as a departure from the original form of the Petrine ministry established and wanted by Christ? For the Church, it is a question of being and not being, a fundamental ecclesiological question. That is the where or place of the one true invisible full form of the Church of Christ. In short, where it exists, the one true invisible Church of Christ. We know the Roman Catholic answer, the Roman Catholic Church. In our opinion, even after the Second Vatican Council, there is not and will not be another. But the other churches will certainly never agree. For this reason, they are visibly separate from us, at least in terms of jurisdiction. If one considers the development of the church's ministry from the days of the apostles as a continuum inspired and guided by the Holy Spirit, this development up to the greatest declarations on the Petrine ministry of the First Vatican Council cannot be traced back to supposedly simpler preliminary phases, where other churches and Christian denominations stopped because they disagreed with the Catholic understanding of the church in general and with the universal primacy of the jurisdiction of the Bishop of Rome in particular, because of their dissent in this regard and have maintained their dissent. As already mentioned, this raises the fundamental question of the true invisible church and its indivisibility, the church that Christ wanted, which was founded on Peter the Rock, and which experienced its birth and Pentecost of Jerusalem and remained true to itself over time. The Second Vatican Council answered this question with its problematic subsists in, which requires explanation. While still convinced that the Roman Catholic Church is the visible and full form of the Church of Christ, the Council Fathers semantically diluted this irrevocable affirmation to appear more inclusive and less exclusive, so as to not hurt any feelings and to recognize and highlight the valid elements of truth and the sacramental structures of Christians separated from it. Now these jars must be reopened in a new attempt in the development of the doctrine and theology of ministry, particularly related to the Petrine ministry and its exercise, must be called into question. The direction should be synodal or biblical and evangelical. The human in this complex reality should be separated from the divine, so that the papacy appears in a new acceptance and a new form of its self-understanding and its exercise. This is ecclesiologically questionable. To put it bluntly, quote, forget the dogmatization of the primacy of Roman jurisdiction in Vatican I and go back to the Reformation period, the first millennium, or even the Apostolic era. Relativize those leading dogmatic statements of an ecumenical council of the Latin West as one of its cultural peculiarities, which in all its jurisdictional intensification applies only to the Latin Church. Renounce this divisive yoke, which the Roman Pope cannot impose on all Christians ex sesse, on his initiative, and not ex consensu, on the basis of the agreement of a majority. We want a ministry of unity, but a synodal one that is capable of conquering a majority and binding only if the majority of those interested, meaning all Christians, have decided in this sense. The Pope as moderator and guide of the synod, nothing more, at most as a credible witness who obviously is also contradicted. How well or badly this works can be seen very clearly in the case of separated brothers. See Anglicanism. Now we understand why the title Patriarch of the West was reintroduced as an attribute of the Roman pontiff after Benedict XVI had abandoned it. Is it a prophet? Personally, I think it is a step backwards and a questionable self-annihilation of Roman Catholic doctrinal development regarding the Petrine office, which has always been a bone of contention in our matter, not only because of the moral failures of the popes, but much more fundamentally and theologically, or in terms of ecclesiastical politics. Affirming again that the papacy is of divine and human right, in order to historically and critically relativize its jurisdictional exercise through this last edition, means for me not believing in the Church as a divine institution. Once again, I believe in the Holy Spirit in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. The latter is clearly Roman in the matter of the Petrine ministry and forms a unity in symbolism with the Holy Spirit. To question this means, according to the Roman Catholic conception of the development of dogma, to question the infallibility of the Church of Christ in general and of the Pope in particular, provided that certain conditions are met. In conclusion, I think that this is a discursive synodal way. It is not possible to create a church with separated Christians, even in this question, just as in the past nothing was achieved in this sense, with its distortions. See the period of Reform. A return to ecumenism, you can only get out of dead ends by repenting, must not exist, even if, in my opinion, the whole truth requires it. We could even talk about unification, but such a meeting should take place in truth, and not as a sort of primacy honored by the Roman pontiff to whitewash a Christianity that continues to drift apart, remains visibly separated in fact and in terms of jurisdiction, and furthermore fails to reach a consensus on essential ecclesiological and dogmatic questions. Regional implementation of the common faith would continue to lag as before. Just think of the ecclesial communities of Protestantism. No, the path proposed by the new document is for me a sui generis mirage, which leads to chaos or tramples on what already exists. With this statement, I am obviously out of the loop. You must decide the matter in your conscience. Just as Jesus pessimistically or realistically announced that there will always be wars, dissent in Christianity on issues such as the Petrine ministry and others will unfortunately remain a reality, not to mention pastoral practice. the so-called reality of life of the churches, due to their different understandings of the ministry and the sacraments. We remain sinners, and the new proposal or the new basis for discussion is nothing more than a weak attempt at cohesion, but not at unity in the indivisible truth that applies to everyone. For us, this truth is clearly the Roman Catholic one. Or perhaps you want to argue that the Roman Catholic Church moved away from the truth of Christ and his will in the 19th century on the occasion of Vatican I, with the dogmatization of the universal primacy of jurisdiction of the Pope. Yet it was precisely infallible. So there is, of course, some, translation kind of issues there. But at the end of the day, he is saying what most of us said about this document, that the document itself rejects the infallibility of the magisterium, it rejects the infallibility of councils, and it rejects the infallibility of the Pope himself. That's what this proposal does. The proposal itself looked and said explicitly that we are to re-examine the dogmatic declarations of Vatican I in light of synodality, in the frame of synodality, in the frame of the 21st century. That's relativism. Bishop Eleganti says it there, that it's relativism. And the one thing it won't lead to is real unity, because you cannot sacrifice truth in the name of unity. It's all you can't. It's not true unity if you do that. Let's take a look here at the live chat. Just to make sure. There are times when I hear you speak, I hear you talk, but in a low tone and breaking away. Wonderful. It looks like nothing I do can fix some of these issues I'm having, other than some choppiness and distortions in your feed intermittently, not frequent though. Great. There's only one more option I have to fixing this, and that's simply to do something that's physically dangerous in my office. So that'll be tomorrow. This is really annoying because I did not have these problems before our storms here. And then after the storms, I had these problems. And I've had the internet service company out here many times. All right. Well, we won't let that discourage us any further. We'll shift over here now to, this was published by Phil Lawler at catholicculture.org a few days ago, and nobody noticed that Father Jan Kruitzks, I think, a priest of the Archdiocese of Chicago, he published a Dubia. Note that he's in the Archdiocese of Chicago. This is a priest taking a very, very great risk. Archdiocese of Chicago under Cardinal Supich. He has written a letter addressed to Pope Francis and to Cardinal Victor Fernandez in his capacity as prefect for the dicastery of the doctrine of the faith. The letter speaks for itself, so he's reproducing it here without comment, although he does add a comment. He's afraid that the priest will not receive the answer he wants from Rome, and he'll explain why at the end. I think many of you will understand why when we go over this. This is very, very short, and you'll see he's asking the question of, well, you'll see. So here's his question. Is the sacrament of holy orders valid when conferred on a deacon or priest by a bishop involved at any time in James Martin activities with the candidate for ordination? That is an important question. One that they should ask, because this is apparently a question we keep seeing in Rome. We keep seeing this happen all the time. Vidal, I know you say it's not that bad, but a lot of people complain, and I get tired of the complaints about it. I really do. And frankly, I need a better internet service. But as Maureen, who's a neighbor geographically, says, good old Shawnee internet. Well, I live in a part of the state where you can't get really good internet service, and satellite internet service isn't going to help. Not with the weather here. But here we go. The question. Again, is the sacrament of holy orders valid when conferred on a deacon or priest by a bishop involved at any times in James Martin activities with candidates for ordination? This is important because we've heard a lot of these stories now of bishops. Carrick is obvious one. I mean, he was, one of the things that they said he did was that he had a beach house that he brought seminarians to and got them to do things unbefitting a Catholic man in general, but especially not appropriate for a future priest of the church. And apparently he had priests there too. This is definitely an important question, and a lot of people won't like the answer that the church has provided, And this is why I expect this is a dubium that'll get ignored, probably. Now, if there's a response to this, I'll report on it. So here is his framing of the question. And similarly, is the episcopal consecration valid in a case where any one of the three bishops taking part in the consecration had been at any time involved in the flesh with the bishop elect? The question is solely about the integrity of the sacraments whenever there is the possibility that the intention of the ordaining minister and the ordained would oppose the intention of Christ for the church, and which would directly undermine the validity of the sacrament. The recent note for the Dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith, Gestis Verbisque, on the validity of the sacraments, in paragraph 18, recalls that the, quote, personal faith and moral condition of the minister who celebrates the sacrament do not affect the validity of the great gift of grace. Indeed, the minister must have the intention of doing at least what the church does, which makes the sacramental action a fully ecclesial act, removed from personal arbitrariness. Moreover, since what the church does is precisely that which Christ has instituted, the intention, together with matter and form, also contributes to making the sacramental action an extension of the Lord's saving work. Matter, form, and intention are intrinsically united. They are integrated into the sacramental action such that intention becomes a unifying principle of the matter and form, making them into a sacred sign by which grace is conferred ex opere operato. If the sacrament of holy orders would be granted as a repayment for favors of a James Martin kind, then it would lack a valid intention. In fact, it would have the intention of the enemy of Christ. A similar example of evil of the intention of the sacrament is in cases of attempts of sacramental absolution to a partner in sin against the Sixth Commandment. Canon 977 declares such absolutions invalid, and the confessor incurs automatic excommunication as per Canon 1378, subsection 1. It is my very strong personal doubt whether ordinations granted in exchange for mutual acts of the flesh are valid under any circumstances because of the lack of the right intention. This includes doubt about the validity of any past priestly or episcopal ordinations in the demonstrated circumstances of mutual involvement in moral depravity. I wish to make this question very clear. My doubt is not about the personal faith and moral condition of the minister of the sacrament, but about using impure intention that opposes the intention of the church. In recent history, there were many scandals involving James Martin-type bishops who were doing bad things of the flesh to their seminarians, along with the intent of ordaining them later to the priesthood. Such cases involve Cardinal McCarrick of Washington, D.C., Cardinal Grower of Vienna, Archbishop Haetz of Poznan, and many, many others. I ask the Holy Father, the cardinals, and bishops of the Roman Catholic Church to consider the question and give it a proper response for the good of the Church and the salvation of souls. A clear official declaration about the possible lack of validity of ordinations between partners in sin against the Sixth Commandment would benefit the Church and ensure the integrity of holy orders. Without curb authority and James Martin activities in seminarians, if the person who they are know that his ordination be invalid. The Church has been very diligent in safeguarding the proper form and matter of the sacraments. In recent cases, for example, a change to a single word in the sacrament of baptism had rendered the baptism and all following sacraments, including holy orders, invalid. The man with an invalid baptism would have to receive all sacraments validly in order to resume his priestly ministry in the Church. Every deacon, priest, and bishop who had ever been ordained by his partner in James Martin activities would need to come forward and submit his resignation until further review and a decision rendered by the Holy See. Related to the question about validity of ordinations between partners in sins of the flesh is the problem of an overwhelming presence of such men in seminaries and among the Catholic clergy in some parts of the Church. Every bishop, vocations director, and seminary rector knows exactly which men applying to the seminary have such proclivities. The question about their inclinations are asked up front at the admission. The same applies for religious orders. It would be prudent for faculty, rectors, religious superiors, bishops, and cardinals with James Martin inclinations to resign positions for the good of the Church. All Catholic bishops need to be advised that they cause grave harm to the Church if they knowingly admit such men to seminaries and ordain them to the priesthood. Such clerics, once ordained, practically cannot be prevented from promotions in the hierarchy. They may become bishops and cardinals, even as prominent as Theodore McCarrick or Hans Hermann Grower. They may try to promote the James Martin parody of holy matrimony and corrupt the teachings of the Church on morality of the flesh to match their own sinful inclinations. They will also promote men with similar evil proclivities and turn dioceses and religious communities into exclusive clubs for James Martin types, where anyone perceived, even remotely, as a threat to their program will be persecuted and excluded. Again, this is a priest in the Archdiocese of Chicago. Please pray for him today, okay? That he doesn't incur the wrath of Cardinal Supich over this. Let's continue. One of my former parishioners, a young man, had once reported to me that he wanted to become a priest in a religious community, but the superior of that community wanted first to engage in activities with the candidate. He was deeply disturbed and scandalized and gave up his pursuit of a priestly vocation altogether. I had no way to verify the story, but advised the man that it was his Christian duty to inform the local bishop about his experience of corruption among the Catholic clergy. Later, after the public scandal involving Ted McCarrick, I realized there was a possibility a local bishop of the same inclination, who, like McCarrick, would not see anything wrong with such activities that are in question. The presence of these kinds of men among the clergy completely destroys priestly fraternity. There are many examples of this kind of corruption already taking place in different parts of the Catholic Church. And now his disclaimer. I have no grudge or any kind of hate against persons of the type in question. I personally know that many of these baptized brothers and sisters make daily sacrifices in order to live in the state of grace. These Catholic men who struggle with this inclination will understand that the ordained priesthood is not for them, and in the clerical state, the potential for causing grave harm to the church and to their own souls would be too great. Let's pause there for a second. I know that many of you probably like for everything he said there. Every single one, I'm sure everybody likes what he says there. That he has said basically that those who knowingly engage in things that the church has said are unequivocally evil, are potentially invalidating their ordination, future ordinations they engage in. That, I mean, it's essentially a form of simony, right? Well, Phil Lawler gives us this editor's note. He says, quote, in all likelihood, Father K will not receive the answer he wants from the Vatican if he receives any answer at all. The Church has a long history of accepting the validity of sacraments, specifically including the sacrament of holy orders, even when there is some evidence of improper intention. For instance, the Church unequivocally condemns the sin of simony. The ordinations done as a result of simony are considered valid. For those who don't know, simony is essentially the buying and selling of sacraments. Okay. Grave sin. There's a pope in history who repeatedly bought the papacy, actually. His story is incredible and tells you that it can be worse than what we have now. Maybe I'll tell the story of that pope someday. But anyway, to render a sacramental ordination invalid, one would have to demonstrate not just that some sinful behavior occurred in the past, but that at the time of the ordination, there was no intention to do what the church intends. That would set a very high bar for nullifying the sacrament, a standard that could be met only in egregious cases. The finding that a baptism was invalid involves a different question: the lack of proper form in the administration of the sacrament. A defect in form or in matter could render an ordination invalid, but that is not the question here. Regarding the more difficult question of intention, the Church has always assured the faithful that insofar as we are all sinners, there is no question that a valid sacrament can be administered by a sinful priest or bishop. In recent years, the Church has taken a very different approach to the question of intention in assessing the validity of marriages, but that is a question for another day. Nevertheless, I think that the question raised in this open letter is pertinent, at least as a topic for discussion and examination of conscience, given the extent of the corruption that has been exposed. And he is 100% correct in that statement. All right. Final thoughts in the live chat here, please. Let's take a look here. It is Father's Day again. Please make sure to remember that on Father's Day, it is customary for Catholics to pray for their priests, which you should be doing every day anyway, but to offer, make sure to pray for your priest. He's a spiritual father to you, after all. And make sure that to, just keep them in your prayers today, and keep all of us in your prayers. It is greatly appreciated, as always. Richard Corin says we need to go back to pre-Vatican II. I agree, but I don't know how we get back there from here, short of a material chastisement that Fatima seems to be speaking about happening, because I think that you are likely to see, I think that's the best way to get back there. final thoughts from anybody else in the chat? Thank you for the Father's Day wish. Yeah, I know the audio has sucked. There's only one more thing I can do, and that's to just physically kind of becomes a tripwire hazard in my house if I do it, but I may have to just to make these streams work. Anyway, thanks very much for tuning in today, folks. As always, pray for the church. Anthony Stine, Ave Maria.